Hi, marketers. This is Dot, and welcome to the Marketing Leadership Podcast. With me here is Margaret Molloy. Her strengths as a connector and moderator have made her a highly influential CMO. She has hosted 100+ leading CMOs as panelists and even thousands of guests from across the globe. She is a LinkedIn top voice, the Drum B2B Marketer of the Year, and a Marketing Society Fellow. We will discuss the concept of simplified marketing, leadership for CMOs. This is a topic she is well known for. I know you guys are ready, so let's do this. Margaret, it's an honor having you on this podcast. How are you doing?
Hello, Dots. It's a treat to be with you and your audience, and I'm calling in from New York City today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we want to start off by you telling us about yourself, your background, your role, and how you've come to be at the summit of CMOs.
That's very generous, Dots. In terms of my personal background, as my accent may betray, I was born and raised in Ireland through college and have worked most of my career in the United States, starting primarily in technology companies with a B2B background.
Yeah, that is great. That is great. So do you want to tell us more about your podcast, the CMOs Commit podcast?
We host some of the world's top CMOs for conversations around the future of branding. And because access is very important to us, we make all of those conversations available on the podcast called How CMOs Commit. And I intentionally named the podcast around commitments because I believe as individuals and brands, we are all a product of our commitments. Commitments tell where we dictate resources, our time, our effort. So that's the name. I invite everyone to follow it, some of the world's top CMOs, and we do a variety of series from creativity to inclusive storytelling to growth and much more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if you're listening, please make sure to follow that podcast on your favorite podcast player. Okay, this topic of simplicity, Margaret, I have been looking for someone through which I can, share this topic with because that's all I'm about myself. I am a fractional marketer, and fractional marketing, you have to simplify your process because you have different clients at different contract levels and things like that. And you're a one-man gang. You need to provide world-class impact, even though you're just you and maybe a couple of subcontracts. So having a simplified marketing as a world-class or high standard level is very, very important. Now, you describe yourself as a simplifier. What does that mean? Let's start with that. What does that mean?
Simplifier is an individual who studies deeply to explain clearly. And that's my personal definition. And what I mean by that specifically is simple is difficult. So you have to do the work to get to clarity. And that includes habits such as focusing on data, being really clear on what your intentions are, and being quite bold and courageous around what you exclude. So a lot around simplicity is about saying no and not saying yes to everything. So that requires courage of conviction. Hence the work. You have to put the work in to know where to place priorities. And I referenced earlier the importance of commitments. It's around where you're committing your resource. So it is at first blush, very basic phenomenon, but when it is done well, it gives this gorgeous clarity to all stakeholders and surprise. Because we talk about simplicity, we say it is at the intersection of clarity and surprise. Surprise being that freshness of experience. Clarity alone is not enough because if you are just clear, you run the risk of being dull and generic. So it requires a blend of surprise. And by surprise, I mean your customers, your employees, all your stakeholders have this aha moment that gives them that feeling of whatever the opposite of dissonance is. the feeling of conviction that I'm in the right spot. I'm having a good relationship with this brand or this individual.
Wow. Wow. I really, really like that. And I think where I am in the phase of my career right now is that, so you mentioned that you define that in two phases, right? Being able to take something that is very complex, maybe sometimes fragmented, and to be able to give an output that is clear, that is concise, but is also as impactful. So, I guess for the last, I've been doing strategy for a long time. But for the last 3 years of my career, I've just been, you know, delivering, say, maybe strategies or campaigns, and just delivering them in a way that is very overwhelming to the clients that we serve. And I recently read a book, trying to remember what it was now, a very famous book that teaches you about, if I remember it throughout during the episode I'll mention, that teaches you about, the importance of clarity when you are making presentations and things like that. I think the name of the author, one of his names is Do Good. I can't remember the name of the book right now. And it's very, very important to be able to have clarity as part of the skills required, especially in marketing, to be able to deliver what is needed. Also, just to mention, I'd like to get your take on this, Margaret. We are in an age where marketing is being redefined because of consumer behavior. And because of that, people are coming up with new terms instead of just redefining the old terms. And I think it connects to what you're saying with regards to clarity, to say, let's not, we in the agency world, we like to use big semantics just to make clients feel overwhelmed or customers. But let's not do that. It's important for us to be very clear, because, just to Margaret's point, in communicating your strategy and even communicating marketing in general. Clarity is probably the biggest ingredient uh, uh, of marketing, or even anything in life. If I would, many times my wife will accuse me of not being too clear. So, um, that's really, really interesting. Are there some of the other habits of simplifiers that you think we should know about? I know you mentioned a couple right now, and if you listen, just rewind to find that. But are there, you know, a couple of other traits that you see from your experience of marketers that have a very simple approach and a very impactful approach at the same time of doing things?
They have a high degree of self confidence. And this confidence allows them to use plain language. Often, when people are not confident or knowledgeable, for example, they use complex terminology and jargon. Well, people who truly understand a subject or have conviction around their strategy can articulate it with clarity. So, that confidence is one factor. Another is plain language. And it's related to how they communicate. Another habit is an appreciation for design and a recognition that beautiful design and language can together compound an experience in a positive way. So they take a very holistic review of brand. For example, they recognize that brand has evolved from words and pictures to experiences. So mention studying deeply. That's at the heart of it, because they often study what is the entire customer journey and where can we have the most impact. Another habit, interesting, I believe, of simplifiers is that they are innately very inclusive people. What I mean by that is often in marketing organizations, marketing can be very siloed or brand can be very siloed. And brand leaders or CEOs who are simplifiers recognize that marketing often is just in charge of that promise that's being made. But other departments need to fulfill that promise. So simplifiers are inclusive because they get all the voices involved, but they're also very decisive because they have that courage to make choices. Sometimes, Dots, here's the secret. Sometimes to be a simplifier takes a lot of courage. It bold. It's confidence, and it's not a popularity contest. Often simplifiers aren't popular because they choose to leave things behind. It's much easier to pile on, to include every stakeholder, every product feature and function that matters to someone who built that feature. But the confidence to not feel you need to play to the crowd and win a popularity contest.
I like that. I like that. I won't stay too much on that. There are many examples of people still doing that today, especially if you live on LinkedIn like I do. Anyway, uh, another question here with regards to what we're talking about. What are some of the benefits and top ways that you think brands can simplify their marketing? And in, in my case, or just in connection to what you're saying, lead by example. How do you think they can do that and from a very high marketing level?
Well, the primary benefit of simplicity is differentiation and being distinctive in your market. So that's important to recognize the benefit. At a financial level, we have studied brands in a study for almost, more than 10 years now. And every year we ask consumers to rank brands based on how simple their interactions with them are and the communication. And consistently, people tell us across the globe that they are willing to pay more for simpler experiences. They also say they are willing to recommend brands that provide simpler experiences. And when you look, and I invite your listeners and viewers to check out World's Simplest Brands on our website, when you look at the stock performance of the brands that ranked highest in our study, it far outweighs the indices of the stock markets. And that's essentially saying that the capital markets rewards simplicity as well. So it's important to focus on the benefits. Why bother? Why simplify? Because it's not easy. It's hard work. That's keeps you anchored on the journey and the merits of the journey. In terms of some of the things they do, they have a clear strategy. It begins with knowing your business strategy and what are your business goals. So I would say to a leader who wants to simplify, go back to what's your business strategy. Then from that, what is your brand strategy such that they tie together, and recognize that it ties also to your organization. My personal definition of a brand is a commitment to a promise delivered. And the delivery part goes way beyond the marketing department, as we mentioned earlier. And the commitment reflects your resource allocation. And the promise is the opportunity of the branding exercise to articulate what is the promise that we are making to all our stakeholders, and how are we delivering on that at every touch point, and continue to measure it and to track our performance.
Yeah, I like that. When I was in the weeds of marketing in 2010, fresh out of college, I read the book Brand Marketing for Dummies, which is where I saw that definition of marketing or branding, as it were. And also, thanks for sharing some of the context around differentiation. For example, the context around simplicity. Not Elon Musk. Uh, Steve Jobs said back in the day, he said, you don't build the technology and then look for users to use it. You look at the user experience requirements for simplicity and then work your way back to the technology. Many people think that Apple is known for creating market verticals, but no, that statement showed us that that is false. Or it shows that they have mastered a system where they look at the needs of the customer, the job to be done, and the simplest way possible in getting that job done, and then working the way back to products or marketing or operations or what have you. So that makes a lot of sense there. Let's look at a different side of the simplified marketing ecosystem. And in being customer centric, you have to always consider employees. So, do you have a sense of how simplicity comes to play with employees? How do they impact this whole? concept or idea to deliver commercial value.
That's such an interesting insight, Dots, in the sense that your employees need to embody simplicity as part of their values and an operating philosophy such that you can reflect that in your marketing, but also in your choices around product, in the choices around your channels, in your social media choices, because all employees are your brand. Often, in a lot of industries, they are the first touch tone to your brand. So we also have studied the impact of simplicity and work. And I'd refer your colleagues and guests and listeners to check that out on our website as well. The top line insight here is in a recent study, only 1 in 4 employees consider their workplaces to be simple. And by simple, we mean easy to get their jobs done and to innovate, present ideas. And that is an extraordinary data point because it illustrates the opportunity for leaders to simplify the employee experience such that they can drive innovation in the organization. Other fascinating takeaway is there is a high degree of correlation between employees who find their workplaces simple and employees who are brand champions. Employers spend so much time courting external influencers and talking about how important their employees are. But the data suggests they haven't put the resources behind those commitments in simple things like people's benefit, onboarding, processes around soliciting input from colleagues, presenting ideas. So there is a tremendous opportunity to simplify the employee experience. And I should say that no one from a leadership perspective or a marketer perspective goes out to intentionally create complexity. It is a byproduct of growth or of expansion or of an organizational framework that can be siloed. So it's a byproduct of all these natural evolutions of an organization, but it's like a rot or a disease. You have to go there and intentionally fight it, or it will multiply very aggressively.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It always comes from growth, and it's important to just keep track, especially from what I personally do sometimes is that when I'm looking at marketing aspects of marketing operations from a strategic perspective that I see that might get complicated in future, then it's important to have some sort of a projection. What might this scenario look like in 10 years from now? Right. Let me give you the most basic example just to show that I know what I'm talking about. Social media handles, for example. You I joined an asset management firm in 2015 that lived on word of mouth. So they brought me in. There's this new digital ecosystem. Let's get clients from there. So we're debating on what the social media handle would be. And I said, this is, they gave me some options. It was my very first day at work, my very first task. And they said, which of these will you choose? I said, I will choose this one because I see this company growing into even different subsidiaries and different aspects of marketing, integrated marketing, larger teams, and things like that. And if putting that into context, we will not have any issues trying to change the domain or trying to change the handle by that time. So that's somewhat of a way of looking at what is the impact of growth in what you are doing now versus what you are going to do, I guess, 10, 15 um, years from now. So that makes a lot of sense. Let us look at another bit of simplicity here or simplified marketing, and it is the concept of measurement. You've mentioned a few things, Margaret, with regards to that too, but Could you tell us more about how we can measure the success of simplified marketing or simplicity in general with regards to our work? Or what has been some of your experiences so far?
The first thing I would say is before a brand embarks on a simplicity or any branding program, it's essential to have a baseline of how the brand is serving us today. And the metrics will vary by organization. Often a popular one is looking at perception. How are we perceived by the stakeholders that matter? And how do we want to move the perception? Are we known for innovation? If that, for example, is an attribute we want to be considered to lead in. So start with that. Again, it's back to what do you want the brand to do? Get a baseline as to how it's achieving those goals. And then as you implement your program, continue to measure the change in a particular metric. Differentiation is an important one. How distinctive is our brand in the minds of our different stakeholders? So understanding what we stand for and asking people, really important to survey your customer base and other stakeholders. Perhaps you're entering a new market and you want to know how we are perceived. Because the value of a brand is in how it's perceived by future and present customers. Something that always sticks to me, perhaps given my heritage in B2B, is this idea that has been put out by the LinkedIn Institute and others that at any point in time, 90% of the people who are targets for your product or service are not in market right now to buy your product. Could be even as high as that. Exactly. So, however, you want to be discoverable when they are. And that requires having your message, having your brand in the places where they are, but not with feature function benefit messages, rather with emotional messages that will build what they call mental availability or will build memory structures such that when that 10 or 5% is ready to purchase, that they think of your brand. So simplicity is part of that. But it's bigger than that. Of course, it's more, that's a more broad based why brand concept. The other part is really important here is consistency. I see so many marketers getting bored with their own content or their own messaging because they are consuming it daily. But they make the assumption that their targets are as bored as they, when the reality is it's not as important to them. So consistency is another one. But yes, getting a baseline and then deciding what matters to you. Typical measures I mentioned are perception, but then you can lather that down to actual revenue and purchases. So every channel can be measured, but ultimately the exercise is what are the metrics that matter to us and how are we tracking on those metrics?
Yeah, not star metrics. And I like what you said in terms of how marketers sometimes, not just marketers, stakeholders within a commercial team, how they see themselves the same as the client. It happens all the time. You know, you're in meetings, you'll be like, how about this? How about that? You're like, it doesn't work that way. It's like, no, it does. It works, it works that way to me. You know, so and there's a lot of that I was interviewing Julian Juleman, and he said in marketing intelligence, which is what we just talked about, this question of measurement, there's a lot of lobbying involved. And the goal of the lobbying is to say, you are not the client. Don't worry, you are not the client. We have data on the clients and how they behave and what their needs are. So I just wanted to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and you triggered an interesting thought, which is sometimes leaders focus on the wrong metrics. Often I call them vanity metrics. So how many followers do we have on insert social media platform without doing the exercise simplifying? What are the metrics that matter to us? So that's why I typically don't list a series of metrics and say there is a blueprint. Rather, it's very case dependent. Um, Ultimately, it's revenue. It's also the valuation of your company. Because so many companies right now got huge percentage of actual value can be ascribed to the brand. They don't have as much physical assets as they used to. Historically, companies had a lot of plant. They had physical premises. More and more businesses now don't have those assets, but the asset they have is their brand, because that's the asset that allows them to enter new markets, be it new geographic territories or new product markets. So managing your brand in the same way that you manage your financial assets. Think about the CFOs at the companies that you know and how rigorously they manage the financial assets of the business. Leaders do not manage brand with the same degree of.
With it. Yeah. Yeah. That is a very thoughtful one. And so much wisdom so far, Margaret. Like I I'm not at the pinnacle of my marketing career, but if I on the road to being there, these are some of the things that I think those listening and people like myself need to keep in mind. Really, when you go, and not just B2B. Yeah, we might be, this may be a B2B heavy episode, but you also know that on this episode we talk B2B, B2C, brand and performance. So it in all stratosphere, and just like Margaret was saying, it's case dependent as well. So thanks for mentioning that. Say we take you to the digital marketing virtual court and ask you to say the truth and nothing but the truth to help you God. So it's gonna be three questions. Are you ready?
Of course, I'll try.
Okay, yeah, you tried. So first one is, what is your best marketing KPI? And I don't want to hear sales or revenue. I know you mentioned that a couple of minutes ago.
Advocacy.
Love it. That is probably one of the biggest brand assets today, where you have to grow from the inside out. I completely agree with that. And that's also in line with everything we are talking about. Yeah, nice one. The second one, how long do you use social media every day? And I see you a lot. You are very active.
Oh, it's my persistent screen is LinkedIn because
Mm,
that's where my community is. So all day, every day. I don't. Here's what I would tell you. For the most part, I work out loud. So, and I manifest that on LinkedIn. On a personal level, I also enjoy Instagram. There was a time when I was very active on Twitter, less so these days. But LinkedIn is a wonderful unity also. So for me, it's a powerful tool and I'm a power user of.
And yeah, you have a very you have an amazing community on LinkedIn. We spoke about that off the mic. So I think it's producing results. The last but not the least question: what is your favorite marketing quote?
I'm going to give you a
I pray it's about simplicity.
okay. You know, so my favorite quote comes from probably one of the world's best brand builders, even though she was not a marketer, and that's Coco Chanel. And Coco Chanel said, "Simplicity is the keynote of all true." I like that quote a lot because elegance is a very powerful compliment to offer to any brand. Because elegance means you've thought through to a solution and it speaks to your delivery of that solution. It's, to me, the best quote about wonderful marketing. It's elegant. It's solving a problem.
Yeah, I agree. And you said earlier that people would pay more even for a simple customer experience. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Two more questions before I let you go. You may have answered this a little bit. I will not lie. Maybe if there's anything else you want to add to it, and that's the fact that why does simplicity not occur naturally in marketing or business? Like, why do we have to engineer simplicity into the process, into operations? Why can't it just be a natural occurrence? Is there a reason why? Are people just drawn to complications? Is it because there is a social reward to sounding complicated? So, like the hedge fund managers, for example. My apologies to all hedge fund managers listening. They say hedge fund managers exist so that you can leave them alone. So, what do you think? Why is it not natural to be a simplifier? in marketing?
So first, I'd say is growth, just
Like you
proliferate.
mentioned before.
Proliferation of products, proliferation of features, proliferation of markets.
Mm,
Second is organizational, in that the promise makers aren't always the promise keepers. So silos, if you will, across organizations, also a byproduct of growth. Sheer law of large numbers, more people to consult, more markets, etc. Another one is you touched on it in your own hypothesis. This idea that in some professions and in some educational institutions, we reward jargon and it's seen as smart. But back to my commentary earlier, I think it's often a veil for lack of confidence and lack of conviction. So jargon can be correlated, perceived to be, with commanding high dollar values. And you referenced that beautifully. Another one is, may make me a little unpopular, but people can be lazy because simplicity requires doing the work, meeting your stakeholders, making choiceful judgments around what to leave on the cutting room floor and what to retain. And people may want, as I said, this popularity contest. It's easier to pile on. It's hard to simplify. Sometimes you have to do the work to get to get the data to help you decide what aspect of a brand, for example, to highlight. So to me, those are the primary reasons why simplicity has to be intentional and can't be left to the natural state because complexity will take over.
mm, mm. I like that. I like that. And it goes without saying. So we'll keep that at that. Another thing I would like to ask in terms of best practices is a lot of CMOs still make a lot of mistakes when it comes to or brands, when it comes to the way they simplify. What are some of those mistakes that you've seen? Again, there is an opportunity that there is a possibility that you've mentioned some of this already, but my goal today is to extract as much wisdom from your head as possible. So, yeah. So, what are some of the mistakes that you think brands and CMOs make when they try to simplify?
The first one my colleague talks about is 13 ideas on a page. And that's the idea of piling on, getting input, driving consensus. And I understand the why. Often the marketing department may not have the political or social capital to be able to make those kind of choices. So it's very important for the CEO to be in the room as well and to provide the CMO air cover. Second one is either too much clarity or too much surprise. I mentioned that simplicity happens at the intersection of clarity and surprise. So too much clarity can lead to brand experiences, brand language, brand identity that can be dull or generic. Too much surprise can lead to confusion and lack of clarity. So either of those variables in excess can achieve the opposite of simplicity. So those are the primary mistakes. At an organizational level, maybe it's a mistake, maybe it's challenge, it's lack of clear business strategy. So who is it that said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you? So that sort of idea is a challenge because when clients come to us for a major brand program, there's a business inflection or they've done that internal work to understand why we're visiting with the brand.
Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Oh my, oh my. We could go on and on, Margaret. You exude so much wisdom and grace in sharing these things that are often overlooked by aspiring marketing leaders like myself. So thank you so much for sharing so much great marketing wisdom. Where can future CMOs like myself follow you?
Myself personally, I share a lot of content, as you mentioned, on LinkedIn. I would love your followers and your listeners to follow me on LinkedIn. You'll also find me on other platforms, but LinkedIn is a simple answer to your question.
If you're listening to the Marketing Leadership Podcast, I hope you are enjoying this so far. And if you are, please leave a 5-star review or a review on whether you're on the Spotify side for those who are Android folks, or Apple Podcasts. If you are in the Apple ecosystem, please do not hesitate to leave a review. And if you do leave a review, there will be a chance for your review to be heard right here on this podcast. We don't have many reviews right now, so we are reading we are reading some of the podcasts. So we get to a point where we have so many reviews, we'll not be able to keep up. Anyway, guys, that's all we have for today. More episodes are available on dotslovesmarketing.com or your favorite podcast player. I would like to thank Deskrig and Content Allies for their support on this. Till next episode, connect the dots.
Thank you for listening to the Marketing Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Listen Network. There will be links to resources mentioned in today's show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.